First BMX riding I ever saw. It definitely wasn't anything in a magazine or on a TV or anything like that. I can't remember the exact instance, but I feel like I remember the first real BMX bikes I ever saw, and that would have just come like kids like jumping curbs like by my house, because we had these little curbs that kind of like had a little transition and a roll at the top in my neighborhood. So it was almost, I don't know, as soon as you had a bike, it was just kind of like something you did. But there was these two kids down the street that had whatever old school Schwinn it would have been. It wouldn't have been as old as like a Stingray or something, but the first proper ones that came out with mags on them. And the first bike along those lines I kind of had was like this Huffy that kind of was supposed to be like a motorcycle, had like this weird shape to it, and like, so I didn't think of it as BMX back then, so it would be like I guess like something subconscious, but it was, it was like jumping shit, but as far as the actual, what I understood as BMX would have just been this track that was by my house. I think I was there for like a Cub Scout meeting or something, and I didn't even know. It was like from seeing motocross on TV. It was the first time I'd ever seen like a dirt track with jumps and shit like that. Nobody was there riding, but it was like, so I mean, it's kind of funny that I saw what like the stuff that people rode on before I saw like people shredding in any type of way. So it's kind of funny because from that it would just be, building, like seeing kids that build jumps, like just like a straight jump across right across the street and something into a field. And it was definitely something on that level, like that was my introduction.
Street level, like.
Yeah. 81.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Something like that. I was young.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember how old you are when you're in Cub Scouts, but I know you definitely don't know anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's funny. It's funny to think about, but I figure like I can't not say going to see the movie Rad, like just because it was the first time I'd ever like sat somewhere for an amount of time to where the whole thing was about BMX. And I can remember going to the movie with my friend, and at the time my brother skated, and it was the first images I ever saw of Pipeline. It's the first time I've ever seen anything like that. And coming out of it, like I didn't, it seemed too far away from jumping a jump across the street, so it almost didn't equate in the same way. But all I knew is that was like the first thing where I was kind of like taken away to another little place by seeing what people did on BMX bikes. And then it was probably the following year where that kicked in on overdrive, because I went to, which would be the second event, I guess, was I went to go just on a whim, heard that there was the Kuwahara team was on summer tour, and Action Wheels in Bethlehem, which was the bike shop by my house that was primarily almost all BMX. I mean, back then that's what they do. They'd have a summer tour come by, and same thing, my brother skated at the time, and so it was almost just to see. I heard there was a quarter pipe there, like an 8 foot tall quarter pipe, and I think the main draw wasn't like to see the people riding bikes. It was like I just wanted to see a ramp. You know what I mean? So I went there, and yeah, I mean, I'll never forget it. Like watching the ramp rider at the time, his name was Gabriel Mariquin, like crank at this ramp and hit it for the first time. And I mean, I'd seen it on the movie Rad, but at that age, like, it might as well have been like Hollywood magic. It didn't seem like what anybody in front of me could be doing. and that was the hook right then and there. Like I never ever thought that it would be something that I could do or whatever, but all I know is that I was just like, yeah,
This is mind blowing.
this is the best shit I've ever seen. And I mean, after that would be would be the following year when Dino came, and which was '88. But if you want to like go outside of it, I mean, the first gathering that I was ever at was '89 in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and it was at I don't know if it was an elementary school. It was either an elementary school or a middle school, but it was Union Terrace was the name of it. And I think it was like even the first time I'd ever like driven somewhere to go ride or like to go to something. And I went with one of my friends, and that's where I saw Lucky Ride for the first time, Mel Cody for the first time. Like I didn't know any of those guys. Chris Holman, and I mean just as a whole, like how many people were there and like what they were riding, and like it had like this real like kind of not usual because now that I think about it you don't really see that anywhere, but had like this concrete like blacktop hip out the back, and that was like the centerpiece. Like those dudes would always go there to jump this thing. It was like this roll over like blacktop hip, like that was outside this one door, just like the difference in land. It was like a thing to like level it. And I mean, that's the first time I saw, like, I basically street riding, or what would be later known as like real street riding, and just using all this shit. It was just like those dudes back then. I don't know if they put it on under ATK. They had like their riding group was ATK, which I think stood for Active Transpo Kids. And it was just a jam they had that I had gotten like a flyer at from the bike shop. You know what I mean? I didn't even know anything. First ones. Okay, probably has to be in top two would be Joe Johnson, No Footed Turn Down. Like, because to this day, still never seen it. And it was on his ramp, or one of the ramps he used to ride up in New England. The 87 or 88, I would have to say. That, just because that one has just stuck with me for so long. Hoffman out of him hitting the 20-foot quarter pipe, just because there's nothing that seemed real about it. I mean, just absolutely nothing. And then after that, shit, there's so many. There's just so many good ones. I mean, I feel like there's like a lot of ones that other people have recognized, but I'm just trying to think of what actually. I want to say that, I mean, fuck, I used to have this Wilkerson poster from like the BMX Plus poster book, him riding the Enchanted Ramp, that was up in my room forever. And I can't remember, I don't remember if he was doing a look back and it was just, and I want to say that only, like, mostly because, like, what that photo was to me for so long was, like, everything about Wilkerson's style, say 88, 87, was what I was drawn to first. Like, as a rider, out of all the riders, there was just, I don't know if it was, like, kind of like the crossover of the clothes that he wore versus how he kind of had a wild style, but it was really good. And just the whole place of him having the ramp at his house at the time to me seemed like that must be the best place in the world. So just seeing the tree in the photo, I can picture all the colors, I can picture the angle, I can picture everything, but I just can't remember exactly. Like, I want to say it was a look back, like it was something like some Bob Osborne or whatever, Wendy Osborne photo. I mean, the only thing I could say would be the Cool Horror Show, because there's three dudes there. But, having gotten to see the Kuwahara team and the Dino team, that would take care of that because Dino was Dino DeLuca and Volker. Kuwahara was Gabriel, and I think there was one dude that kind of rode both Flatland and Ramp. I can't remember what his name was. And then Mike Loveridge was the Flatlander. But outside of that would have been Rich Bartlett. He would have been out of like a show situation. Somebody that I came across was Rich Bartlett. Yeah. Influential, and I think for me it goes to a level that, because I wasn't at that point, I'm not looking at these dudes like the guys I saw in magazines as influence. I mean, I've said it before and things I've talked about, but those dudes were superheroes. Like, you can't really say Superman's an influence. You can't really say, like, what those dudes did was nothing within the realm of like what I even thought was achievable by me or my friends. It just didn't seem real because it was magazine, first of all, was like something that only famous people were in, movie stars, whatever, and they were doing shit that I couldn't even comprehend. So it would have had to have been Jay Lonergan, because he was, the first person that was kind of like an elevated like, he was good, like, right from when I first became aware that he rode BMX. He was good. He was racing, he was traveling for racing. And I remember the first picture I saw of him was, I think, in my newspaper, because I was a newspaper delivery person, and he was the kid from my baseball team at the time. I was like 11 years old or 12 years old, and the year that we played baseball together, he said, like, later, he's like, yeah, after that year I had to make a decision, either keep playing baseball or like race BMX, because he was doing both, and they cut into each other. So he would have been the first. My other friend Dave Vandermoss, who I grew up, and he's who I rode with all throughout my years in school the most. So it'd be impossible not to say that he wasn't a huge influence on me, because he was already riding by the time I found it, and he was like this, I just thought of him as like this kind of quiet but kind of heavy metal dude that, to me, like, I had so little self-confidence growing up that, what he had, I was like kind of drawn to it. We became friends. And the third, I have to say, like, as a group, was Mel Lucky and Holman. Like, I can't say one over the other one, because each of them were the bridge between the dudes in magazines and kind of what was surrounding me. They were like this next level, but they were real. They were tangible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I became friends with them. So, like, there's nobody that I didn't know at the time that could have been more influential than people that were directly in my life. Tabletop, turned down, and I don't know how to differentiate between an alley-oop air and a 360, because it's kind of the same thing, but there would have to be some shared thing between those two. First would have to be the first real trip I went on, like, after high school, was me and Dave, who I just talked about, Vandermoss at the time. That summer passed directly after high school, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take a year off. Like, okay, I should be going to college, blah, blah, blah. And at the time, Jay and Sal, they lived out at the POW house in California, and it was like, oh, go visit those dudes, because those dudes were a year older than me, and they had already been out there for a year. And just, if you grew up riding then, because of everything you saw was California, you had this want to, like, oh, gotta go there. And it wasn't, I mean, there's so much that happened in that trip aside of actually reaching the destination, because we ended up staying for way less time than I thought we would have. But I think just that first time of like being, like everything was new, every last thing was new, like being on a road trip like that, being in all these states I'd never been to, seeing all this shit that I never, it just completely blew my mind from any of the traveling I did, like around the direct an hour or two from where I grew up. So that was really, really had a lot to do with a lot. I mean, I guess formatively at the time, what I didn't realize, I mean, that planted the seed from just wanting to always go. Just go, see something you want to go do. Don't make excuses. Just, you're missing out if you're not going to it. And that voice is never gonna go away unless you figure out a way to do something in direct relation to what's gonna feed it, you know? Second would be my first time to England, which was in '93, the year after that, to come over for the King of Concrete. And same thing, it was just because it just blew the doors wide open on, I remember the first time I saw a proper English breakfast, I was horrified. I was just like, I didn't eat beans. Everything just, there was like these cooked tomato and mushrooms on my plate, and the time it was, if I was gonna have eggs, it was eggs and toast. But it was just, it was like, I think the first time I'd ever had alcohol at that point. I drank like a cider. First time I was ever drinking tea. All this different, I mean, it seems so funny to think about, but you really do realize, you're so rigid in so many, not for the awareness like, oh, this is just how I am. It was just, you just don't think of these things. And so coming over here, ROM was definitely the high point of it all, because I saw concrete that was in shapes that I had only seen from the 70s and early 80s, and I just couldn't believe that I was somewhere that existed. Yeah, it's very hard to summarize, but that trip for sure, and then the T1 World trip for like a way broader spectrum of the exact same thought process. Yeah. And really, I remember, learning to ride a bike, that, just a bike in general, because, I mean, it's the first thing that takes you away from your street, takes you to the next block, and just like looking around like, whoa, and there's like this, no man's land street that like, oh, you can't go across that. That's like, you're not old enough yet. But then you sneak across it, and you're just like, so it's all in line with that, but you're at different points of your life, and you always have different levels of that, like you're ready to grow, that you don't even realize at the time, but is brought about by experiencing things that you never have before. Yeah, Jerry Galley, Stuart King, and fuck, who did we just talk about today? Oh, Ian. Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, those three, I mean, there's not even, and it's not to say at all that there's nobody else, but
No.
you know, Ian was somebody that I had seen and knew of before I came here. So he was always kind of like the main dude, because, like, what he was doing, when I saw the things that he was doing, it was, ability wise, I wasn't in line with it, but what I was interested in was in line with it. So it's like every time I saw something that Ian was up to, just somehow was at that time like where my interests lie, and I was just, man, this dude he's just something else, And then Stu came from me coming over to the King of Concrete and seeing, same thing. I mean, just his style of riding was something, the way he did things was something I had never seen. It went well beyond just someone being good or doing certain things. It was just the way he did them, and that always stuck with me. And Jerry is, you know, you don't even need to say it. I mean, if you can put a visual with the name, then you know. You know, it's like he was as magical as it got. Is, you know, especially for, it was like seeing a unicorn. You know, not that he was hard to find at that time, but it was that he was doing stuff in a way that you didn't even. The same thing. It was an extension of like what I saw in Stu, but it was not comparable at all. It was just on this completely different level of anything that I had seen. It's hard not to like think back to, you know, I'm trying to go back and forth and think that, okay, was I around that time and just missed it, or you know what I mean? But I would have to say I'm pretty sure it would have been the '87 King of Earth finals at Wilkerson's house. Um, because of what I already described of what that time was, or like what that, how I viewed that place. Like seeing the two hip video from that year, I had like the worst copy, and
we got it over here as well.
and I just remember like through all the tracking problems of the of the video and all this, it was. I mean, words like raw is so overused, and that, but like, I feel the grittiness of that I can remember the video as was directly translates to like what I would have imagined that scene to have been. You know, is just it was it was the era of ramp riding that was the hook for me, and the way variations were and what people looked like. It was just, I don't know. I just look back at that as being like probably. I mean, it was a quarter pipe that got me into riding, and it's still my favorite aspect of riding. If I had to pick one, you know. So just everything that surrounded that, and Wilkerson was kind of like the most. I don't know, kind of doing shit for himself, and I even remember, and it wasn't even like me even being able to rate what tricks were progressive or hard or whatever. And I just remember the clip of Dominguez over rotating a 900 there, just in a jersey, in leathers with like an open face helmet on, and I can remember it clear as day. And he like spun too far. I would say trust more that comes from inward than what you see outward.